Hello, I welcome you on again to another exciting lesson, early biology, designed to maximize the full potential of every biology student out there. If you're not here, you're wrong. This is the right place to be if you want to boost your biology knowledge. Now, the last comments I left, or the last video that I presented, I said if you have any topic whatsoever you want me to teach you, just put it there. Actually one of my students reached out to me and said she's not clear on a particular topic, so we decided to tackle it. So before us we have reproductive system in plants. So briefly I'll be explaining it as easy as possible. It's going to be exciting, so just be patient with me, hold on, and I assure you that at the end of this lesson you will be enlightened. So don't forget to like and subscribe, and of course share with your friends, get them into the program, let them also benefit from what you're benefiting from. Okay, let's get straight to work. Now, the topic before us is reproductive systems in plants. Now, plants, we all know, are living things, so they can equally perform reproduction. Now we're going to be looking at the parts of the reproductive systems in plants. We're going to be looking at pollination, and we're also going to talk about the process of fertilization. So these are the three things we're going to be focusing on today. So let's get straight to business. Now, I am going to start this lesson by talking about the reproductive system in plants. What do I mean? Now, the part in every plant that has the reproductive system, that is the reproductive system, is the flower. The flower is the reproductive system in every plant. Why? Because in the flower, you have both the male reproductive organs and the female reproductive organ in the flower. And those flowers that have them both are considered bisexual because they have them, but not all flowers have them. Some flowers are unisexual, like pawpaw. You have a male pawpaw, you have a female pawpaw tree. But I'm talking about flowers that have them both, bisexual. So let's get straight to business. Now, I'm going to draw a longitudinal section of a typical flower. I'm going to label it. I'm going to show you the part that is the female part, the part that is the male part, and their functions. So let's get straight to business. Okay, so I'm drawing it right now. Something like this, down there. Okay, we have something like this. It's fine shape. Yeah, I know. I'm a bit of an artist. Okay, so we have this. Okay, we're almost done. Let's draw the petal. Okay, so this right here is the longitudinal. Longitudinal is the half, like it's cut in perfect half. The longitudinal section of a typical flower, right here. So let's label it. So here we have stigma. We have the stigma. Here we have the style. Here we have the ovary. And here we have the oval. Here we have the sepal. Here we have the receptacle. And here we have the stalk or the pedicel, whichever choice you want to use. Pedicel. Okay? So in this one, on the left side, here we have the anther. Here we have the filaments. Sorry, let me write that properly so you can see it. Filament. Yeah. So, and of course, we have the petal. Why would we forget the petal? The most attractive point in the flower. Now, so this right here is the longitudinal section of a typical flower, and it's labeled. Okay? So now watch this. I'm going to separate them. I'm going to show you the part that makes up the female reproductive parts of the flower. Okay? The stigma, the style, the ovary, and the oval. These four the collective name is the pistil. The pistil, or you can say the carpel. The names are interchangeable. The pistil is the collective name of the female reproductive parts in a flower. Okay? So we have the stigma, the style, the ovary, and the oval. These are the female parts in the flower. Okay? Then we only have two for the male. We only have the anther and the filament. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to do this, but this one I'm going to write it in a vertical manner. So the collective name for the male part in a flower is the stamen. Okay? So that's it. So the pistil is the female, the collective name for the female parts, while the stamen is the collective name for the male part. Okay? You know, we know I told you that this is a bisexual flower. Okay? So, real quick, a typical flower is made up of 4 floral parts. Oh, sorry, 4 floral parts. Okay? So number 1 is the calyx. So let me just quickly write it down here. 4 floral parts. I'm still trying to put more light in this. Number 1, we have the calyx. The calyx is simply the sepal. So I'm going to put in front here is the sepal. Okay? The calyx is the sepal, this part. Then we have the corolla. The corolla is simply the petal, the attractive part of the flower. Then number 3, we have the androecium. That is the male part. The male part in the flower, which is the anther. In the anther, we have the pollen grain. So let me just spread it out. Let me write pollen grain. Okay, pollen grain. The anther. The pollen grain is in the anther. Okay, and we have the filament. This is the male part. Okay, of the flower. Then lastly, number 4, we have the gynecium. The gynecium. This is the female part. Okay? The female part is what? The stigma, the style, the ovary, and the oval. So let me just quickly write it out. The stigma, the style, the ovary, and the oval. Forgive my handwriting, okay? So these are the 4 floral parts of a flower. So in case WAEC, or in case you're asked, okay, you can decide to spread them like this if you want, or you can, keep them in this encased form. So let's look at the functions real quick before I get to the other part of the matter. Now, the function of the stigma. I'll start with the stigma. The stigma is what collects the pollen grain. The stigma is what collects the pollen grain. Okay? That's number 1. Number 2, the style. The style is like a tunnel in which when the stigma takes the pollen grain travels through the stigma. In fact, the style connects the pollen grain with the ovary. It's like a funnel, like a tunnel that connects it. So when the pollen grain falls on the stigma, it's going to travel down through the style to the ovary. So that's the function of the style. The style connects the pollen grain to the ovary, in quotes. Now, the function of the ovary contains the ovule, and apart from that, the ovary is what will later become the fruit, what you eat, the edible part. Okay? Then we now have the ovule. The ovule is the part that will later become the seed. Okay? And that is what produces the female gamete, the female sex gamete. The same way in humans or mammals, you have ovum, you have ova or ovum, egg. Okay? Yeah, so the ovule is what produces the female sex gamete in a plant. Okay? Yeah. So that is the function. Then the function of the sepal. The sepal protects the flower in its budding stage. Its budding stage, budding. It's budding stage. When it's still young, it protects the petal. Okay, And also it's green in color. That means that it can perform photosynthetic activities. It can manufacture food because it's green. It possesses chlorophyll. All right. Then we now have the receptacle. The receptacle is what carries the flower. It's what carries the flower. Okay, it holds the flower. Then we have the stalk or the pedicel. It connects the flower to the stem. It connects the flower to the stem. Okay, it connects the flower to the stem. So now we're almost done. We have the petal. The petal is the colorful part of the flower. It is what attracts pollinators to the flower. When the bee sees the beauty of the flower, it's mesmerized by the color. So it goes there, it knows that, okay, for it to be colorful, it has nectar. So in the process of sucking or taking or extracting nectar, it carries the pollen grain and pollination thus occurs. Then we have the anther. The anther contains the pollen grain, the male sex garment. The same way the oval contains the female sex garment, the anther is, synonymous, is similar to oval in the sense that it houses the pollen grain, which is the male sex garment in the plant. Then we have the filament. The filament is what carries the anther. Okay? So that is the parts and the functions of the parts. So let's go to the next part. Okay, so we're done with that. So next, we're going to talk about pollination real quick. I feel that if I do not talk about pollination, you might not really understand, because pollination precedes fertilization. Pollination is the process that leads to fertilization. The same way you have mating or sexual intercourse, copulation is what leads to fertilization. All right, so I'm going to clean this now. I'm going to clean it now. Okay, I know it's beautiful, but hey, gotta move. All right, so next we have pollination. So what is pollination? What is pollination? I know some of you already know it, but let's still talk about it real quick. What is pollination? That is the question. Pollination is the process, is the transfer of matured pollen grain. Keyword, matured pollen grain from the anther of the flower to the stigma of the flower, the same flower or a different flower of the same species. Okay? Let me say it again. Pollination is the transfer of matured pollen grain from the anther of the flower to the stigma of the same flower or another flower but the same species, which leads to what? Fertilization. So like I said, fertilization is the aftermath of pollination. Okay? Alright, so that is pollination. Let's now go to the process of fertilization. What actually happens in this pollination? What happens to the pollen grain? How does it get to the ovule? How are seed made and how are fruit formed? Let's do that real quick. Okay, so I'm going to just simply write a subtopic right here. I'm going to say process of fertilization in plants. Real quick. So I'm going to do it number one. I'm going to make it as easy as possible. So number one, I will start by saying, number one is the pollen grain lands on the stigma. That's the first step. The pollen grain lands on the stigma, or you can say drop. Lands, drop. Let's use the word drop. I think drop is more, it's more of action. It drops on the stigma. That's the first step. Number two, as it drops on the stigma, a pollen tube is formed. A pollen tube is formed. A pollen tube is formed. Okay? We know what that means? When it drops on the stigma. Okay, let me draw this. Let me just draw this real quick. Okay, just the mid part. When the pollen grain falls here, you know this is the stigma, remember? We said this is the stigma. Remember the diagram, you can go back to check. The pollen grain, when it falls on the stigma, okay, a pollen tube is formed. You know what? There is the plant releases a special hormone that causes a hole or a tunnel to be formed almost instantly. So you have the, okay, let me draw this one. Okay, inside here we have the oval. So you have like a tunnel formed here that now connects, that now, you know, enables the pollen grain to travel through the style to get to the ovary. So we call this one the pollen tube. This tunnel that was formed is called the pollen tube, okay? All right, so the pollen tube is formed. That's basically what I meant. Now, number 3, the pollen grain travels. The pollen grain travels, sorry for my handwriting, travels through the stigma. Through the stigma. Oh, sorry, through the style. Sorry about that. Through the style, not stigma. Through the style. So the pollen grain travels through the style. This is the style. It travels through the style. Alright? Okay. Now, when it gets here, it's going to come somewhere. It's going to come around like this. It's going to come around. Let me zoom it. Let me make it bigger. Okay. It's going to come around somewhere here. And in here, there is a space. There's a space that it will be able to get into the oval. Okay? That space or that gate is called micropyle. It's called what? Micropyle. Micropyle is like a gate that enables. Micropyle is somewhat similar to the cervix in the womb of a woman. It controls the opening and the closing and the access to the womb. So the micropyle is when it. So the next one is number 4. The pollen grain enters the micropyle. Okay, into the oval. Please note, you know that the ovary is what houses the oval, okay? But the fertilization occurs inside the oval because the oval is where the sex garment is, so that there will be fusion between the male and the female sex garment, okay? So the pollen grain enters the micropyle into the oval, okay? Yeah. So number 5. Now, please note, the pollen grain actually has 2 nuclei. 2 nuclei. It actually has 2 nuclei. Okay? Inside this pollen grain is 2 nuclei, like 2 dots. 2 nuclei. Okay? Now, when it enters the oval, okay, the 2 nuclei are going to fertilize 2 things in the oval. That is why it's called double fertilization. Okay, so the pollen grain enters the micropyle into the oval, all right? Okay, now the nuclear. One nuclear fuses with one female garment to form zygote. That is first fertilization. And the other fuses to, sorry, let me just clean this so you won't be confused. Let me clean this micropyle and the other fuses to form endosperm. Thus, it is called double fertilization. That is why it is called double fertilization. Okay? That is why it's called double. I'm sure that you probably heard that, but now you know. Okay? That is why it's called double fertilization, because it's the nucleus, the 2 nuclei in the pollen grain, they are fusing with 2 things. One will fuse with one of the female garment to form zygote. The other one will form endosperm. Okay? Right. Now, So finally now, the ovary will later become the fruit, okay? And the ovule will become the seed, okay? So basically, the ovule, after fertilization occurs, when the plants begin to mature, begins to grow, the fruit you are seeing is actually the ovary, while the seed inside is the ovule. So that is basically the easy step-by-step on how fertilization in plants occurs. Easy, right? Very easy. So try and go back to the video, look through it again, okay? Look through it, and it's not hard. I'm sure you've enjoyed the class. I'm actually very happy that I was able to teach this. Excel, I hope you got it. Yeah, I'm actually glad. Yeah, so please just put in the comments if you need me to explain any topic whatsoever. It doesn't matter, SS1, SS2, SS3, I'll do it for you, I'll tackle it for you because I love you. Yeah, so we've come to the conclusion of today's class, and please don't forget to like and subscribe, okay? And share with your friends. And of course, remember, Jesus loves you and Jesus is King. God bless you.